Space Needs Committee work session to order. I'm Kevin Fred Demick. I'm the committee chair. I'll be running the meeting today. If you could stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, can we have roll call, please?
Mr. Demick.
Here.
Mr. Healy.
Here.
Mr. Sear.
Present.
Mr. Fanton.
Here.
Mrs. Hanchett.
Here.
Mr. Havey.
Here.
Mrs. Root.
Here.
And Mr. Harris. 7 present.
Thank you. The reason for our meeting today, work session, is to give our final presentation of our space needs study and building assessments from Hunt Engineers. I'd like to welcome Mike Sagleben and Alexa, his assistant. They will be here to give the presentation on this. I'd like to ask that as we go through this, there'll be a PowerPoint. You have a spreadsheet here and so on of what's involved, but to please hold off on questions throughout this presentation. It's going to be a little bit confusing at times, so save your questions to the end. I'm sure the next page may answer some of those confusing questions, but give them time to do what they need to do. We would certainly appreciate it. So I'll turn this over to Mike. Let him go from here. Thanks, Mike.
Does that work? Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Mike Salmani, project manager for Hunt Engineers, and with me is Alexis Westervelt. She helps me with, she's helped me for the last year, about a year and 2 months. We've been doing this when we first started. And so the county had asked us to do a space study and look at your buildings and look at how they're being utilized. And so we started that about a year and 2 months ago, and it's gone pretty well. It's gone pretty well. So there's kind of two major parts of the project. There's the space studies part of it, and then there's the building condition survey part of it. And so we'll discuss both of that and how that's relevant to the final product. But just to talk about what's in front of you, the packet is the PowerPoint, slide for slide. And then the roll of drawings, those are also in the PowerPoint, but they're larger so that you can see them. You can kind of see what's going on. It's going to be hard to see it on the screen, and obviously it's going to be very hard to see it on the packet. So those drawings are just in a large version of those floor plans that you'll see later on in the presentation, okay? So, to get going, we don't have the, there we go, all right. Well, she might be frozen.
Outside chance. Sorry, Mike.
No, you're okay. Hit it against your knee like the TV remote. It did work earlier. I tried it a couple minutes ago. Success? All right, thank you very much. Okay, so when we first started, what we did was we gave all the department heads a questionnaire, and it was a 5-6 page document, and it went all the way through from, is your space currently good? Is it being utilized? Is it a good space for you? What other things can be provided to make your department function better. And that would be adjacencies to other departments. It could be size, conference rooms. There was a slew of things that was on that questionnaire. So we had that questionnaire, they filled that out, and then myself and Alexis met with every department head and we discussed different things, and just to kind of get clarifications on that. And after those meetings, what was determined was these are the departments that had sufficient space. They didn't really have, they might have had some concerns, but their space was sufficient, okay? The space that was allocated to them was sufficient. As we went on through our process, we had to touch some of these spaces. Even though they had sufficient space, they were going to get affected in this space plan. So the bold departments are departments that got affected, even though they were sufficient. Okay. And that's just part of it. You might get questions on, well, I was good. Why are you guys moving me? It's just how it works when you're moving things around. And then there was the departments that did not have sufficient space, right? So the county attorney, the health department, and it was mostly space, right? Everyone had the parking concern, but this was really space, and sometimes it was location, but for the most part, it was a space requirement. So these are all the departments that really drove a lot of what we did throughout this project. And then there's a few departments that do not have sufficient space that we have not addressed yet, okay? Because it just didn't make sense. Like the county historian, there's some things that are still happening with her that she's trying to get some things pushed out to towns and stuff like that. So we're not there yet. But they're really the reason for this slide is we didn't forget about them. They're still on our radar, but we're just not there yet. And then the additional concerns that we came about was the parking, which everybody knows we have a parking issue here. But we feel like this space plan addresses parking in a good way. I think you're going to see a lot of positive come out of that. And record storage was another one. So we got into this kind of space needs and kind of figure out where people want to go. Well, we want to know what the facilities look like. You know, we don't want to put somebody into a facility that isn't up to par or up to your standards. So what we did was a building condition survey. And so that is basically where I have my team of engineers and architects come out to every single building and they do an evaluation. And so Allegheny County has about 55 buildings. So our team went to every single one of them, okay? And they evaluated every single building. Alexis did a lot of this. She drew, we have floor plans for every single one of your buildings now. And then we have photographs for every single one of your buildings. So you have a lot of information. And so that information gets put into, it's a software that Hunt has created so that the county has a place to house all this information. And it's basically a living document where you can go in now, a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and that can either grow with more recommendations or it can get smaller by doing work and taking recommendations out. And so it's ever evolving. And so that's what's really nice about the program is that you can formulate projects out of that. So if you have, let's say you have some recommendations, some deficiencies in a building, and you add all those up and it comes to a project cost. Let's say it's $1 million. The program also includes incidentals, inflation, contingencies to give you a total project cost so you really know where you stand if you're going to go out and do a project. And it's touch of a button type of stuff. And all of you could have access to that to look and see what your facilities, what the shape of your facilities are in. You know, it's just a matter of logging in. Sir?
Does that include the life expectancy of those buildings and likelihood of growth?
We can include life expectancies of systems HVAC systems, electrical systems and stuff like that, sure. Yep. Now, potential growth, I don't know where you're getting at with that.
Well, just whether a department is likely to grow or not get smaller. I doubt any of them are going to get smaller, but
Well, that was a question on our questionnaire, which is actually housed on our BCS. So those questionnaires that we gave the department head, those are also going to be housed in here for information as well. So you'll have that information. Okay? Basically, we think you should house anything that comes to facilities, you should put on this site. It's basically a library for stuff that you have and need. So it's a nice site. So just to kind of go through the site real quick, so if you guys down the road choose to go on it, you kind of have an idea of what you're looking at. So the first, it's basically got a dashboard, and on that dashboard you can look at recommendations by discipline. So if you wanted to look at architectural recommendations, it would be things like the facade of the building, the carpet, the ceilings, the doors, the layout, that type of thing. If you wanted to look at electrical, it'd be the panels, it'd be the outlets, lighting, is the lighting LED, that type of stuff. And so you can see that under the dashboard. But then you can also break it out by category. And so if you wanted to see things from the outside, exterior, and that's what that's kind of showing up in the upper right-hand corner. You can look at recommendations that are on the outside of the building. You can look at recommendations that are on the inside of the building. ADA, so health and safety, if you felt like you wanted to, if you were going to see grants for converting things to ADA compliance, you might say, okay, let's go see what our buildings need for ADA compliance and apply for that grant. So you can just click those things, those categories, and it'll just give you those recommendations. So it's got a nice filter capability to it. The next item on the dashboard is the recommendations. So this is really the meat of it, right? This is, if you look at the left-hand column, you have the building. So every building has a designation. And you could imagine those designations they get pretty broad because you have 55 buildings, right? So you have a building designation, then you have the discipline, which we just talked about. You have a category, which we just talked about, interior, exterior, health and safety. And then there's some categories in there, project, year, and priority. So that gives you the ability to create projects for either now or down the road. If you want to start planning, let's say you want to do a 5-year plan, well, you can say, okay, we're going to do these items in year 1, these items in year 2, 3, and so forth and so on, and you can put them in a project. Now, when you start to get into the planning of it, if you want to pull some things out of that project, because maybe your budget's not lining up, you can then change it to be in a project or out of a project. If you want the county to do some work instead of the contractor, you might pull it out of a project. So it gives you that flexibility to create these projects and to keep track of it. And then you have the recommendation. Every recommendation has its own line item so that further down the road you're able to track it. You have the recommendation here. There's some examples would be flagpole replacement, lighting and controls, tree replacement, asphalt, mill and overlay, right? Those are things that you're kind of, mill and asphalt replacement seems like that's something you always see, right? It's a yearly thing that counties usually do. And then it has the estimated cost. And so, this cost was created, within the year, but in 3 years, 4 years, we have that inflation factor built into the program that helps, it'll build inflation into it. So you're not going into these prices and changing them 3 years from now because they're 3 years old. We're just counting on inflation to make that change. Okay? The next slide looks at, these are just the floor plans. So like I said, every building has its own floor plan. So that's pretty self-explanatory. And then the next slide is documents. This is where, like I talked about, you might have asbestos reports, or you might have the department head questionnaires. But we also put the floor plans with associated photos. Okay, so that's what this is showing. This is showing a floor plan. If you go in there, you'll see a floor plan, and you'll see little icons in every single room there. And if you were to click on that icon, it'll bring up a folder. Just like, it'll bring up a photo, just like this. How do we click on this to be able, she would have to do it up there? So if you can click on that link below, and so what happens, if everything goes well? Were we expecting that? No. So I'll talk you through it. So what happens is when you click on that icon, a photo like this comes up, and what happens is it's a 360 photo, so you can see up, down, all the way around the room. And we have that in every single space in your county. So it's a nice tool. You don't have to drive out there anymore. You can just click on a button. So I think you'll find that very handy. So that kind of concludes the building condition survey part of it, right? So now you have this. Oh, now I'm stuck. Sorry. So now you have this just database of information on all your facilities. So anytime you want to do a project or you want to move a department into a space, you'll have information on what you need to do to that space to be able to perform that task. All right. And you'll be able to set plans, whether it's a 1-year plan, a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan. You'll be able to plan out where now everybody will be on the same page. It won't be like, year by year, month by month. So we've talked about a little bit about the questionnaire and how we got the information that we needed to do a space analysis. Perfect. We got the information on that we needed to do something, right? We had some deficiencies that should be corrected. We looked at the facilities, what needed to happen to the facilities. Then we had to look at how we're going to address them. So we looked at addressing needs for these buildings here, courthouse, county office, Crossroads, Parsonage, which is a project that's ongoing now, DPW also, fire and EMS, 55 Chamberlain and Board of Elections. Okay. So if we look at addressing the needs for the courthouse, the departments that are affected here is the district attorney, the public defender, tax map, real property, social services, and court. So this is where you might want to, if you want to look at the larger floor plan, it might show you better. Really, the focus is on the color. Okay, don't pay attention to the actual rooms, because the rooms don't represent what they would be. Right? We would do some renovations, or maybe we wouldn't. When we get to that point is when we would look at that if the actual space layout currently fits the new department going into it. A lot of times it does. There's very little you have to do in terms of reconfiguration. But I would focus on the actual colors and the square footage that we allocate. So on the left, we have existing to remain. And we're talking specifically the courthouse, okay? And for here, it's specifically the ground floor. Existing to remain. So we're not going to touch information technology. They're already at 1547 square feet, and that was fine with them. So we're not going to touch them. We're not going to touch probation. Sorry. Yep.
If I could keep it in front of the mic,
Oh.
because that's the only way the live stream.
You got it. Sorry about that. We got probation at 36 square feet, and there's some mechanical space as well. So we're not going to touch those. Those are just going to remain. We are going to propose that we affect the district attorney. That was at 5720. That was previously at 2159. Okay, so that's a substantial size increase. The sheriffs, they're going to grow a little bit, and the public defender is going to grow a little bit as well. Okay, so on the ground floor, we're gonna make those those changes. And can you see on the left, it's what it is now. For example, the treasurer is where the district, we're proposing the district attorney goes. Do you guys see how that works? So on the left side, it's the green, which is currently the treasurer. On the right side, it's that darker blue purple, which is the district attorney. Okay? Again, there's going to be a lot of information here, so I'm going to try to give you enough information to decipher it, because you're not going to pick it all up right now. Courthouse first floor, same type of thing, right? So we have some spaces that are going to remain. Mechanical, court, there's a lot of court space that we're not going to mess with. The DMV, all right? County clerk, in a way, right? They're going to get affected, but they're going to stay in the same spot. And victim advocate. And then what we're proposing to change is the tax map. We're going to move them from downstairs on the ground floor, and they're going to split the space with the clerk. And then social services. And they're going to take the old place of, I believe that was the DA? Or was that the courts? Sorry, that's the courts. So there's some conversations that are going to need to be had too with court, right? Because you do get revenue from the court. So there's some conversations that have to happen, because there's going to be some swapping and some swapping of space. So that's the courthouse first floor. Courthouse second floor. So this is where we take away the DA that's on the second floor, and we make that all court. So now on the second floor, you don't have any intermingled departments. It's all court. You know, so that really turned out nice. We're happy about that. Pushing on to Crossroads, and we're only going to affect one building out there at Crossroads. Office of the Aging, we're going to leave that alone. That's functioning well for them. They have a lot of vehicles, so it functions well. She was happy with her space out there. But the other building, we're proposing we make that the health department. Okay, get them out of this complex and put them out there. So that's kind of what that looks like, right? We have fire EMS out there. We're going to pull them out of there. Planning and tourism, we would pull them out of there, and we would make that. Most likely, we would make that whole building health department, but we're actually showing that there's a little added, there's some extra space. So if there's something that comes up where we need extra space, we have it out there at that building. But it's likely that could just all become health department. And you can see they're currently 6,000 square feet. They're going up to 7,500. So you can imagine a lot of these. We've yet to have a department drop in square footage, right? So they're going to be happy. I've yet to find a department head that says, "Can I use less space?" County office building. So all right, this is the big one. So these are all the departments that get affected with the county office building, and there's quite a few of them. And so we'll kind of dig into that a little bit. Sorry, I gotta stay in front of this thing. So county office building, ground floor. So the sheriff's gonna stay, mechanical space is gonna stay, social services is gonna stay, and so is IT. But we're proposing fire service storage, which is just that back piece there, that back room. but employment and training coming over into this building. So that's a nice. First floor, everything remains. Nothing changes on the first floor. Second floor, this is where a lot happens. So, existing to remain mechanical, but proposed is treasury coming over to the second floor. They're on the right, where the basically where we're at right now. Planning and tourism, coming from Crossroads, with a stop in between. Economic development, EMT, fire services, and IDA. So we're proposing all those departments on the second floor. Then county office building on the third floor. Mechanical stays, information technology stays, but board of legislators goes to the third floor. County administrator, human resources, workers' comp. So a lot happening up there as well. So these are some of the projects that are on the horizon. Parsonage House, which I'm sure you've heard recently, renovations to that. DPW facility, which we're currently in design with. Fire and EMS building, so there's talk about that, and I have some further slides further past this. 55 Chamberlain, Board of Elections, and then the county historian, district shops, the WAM building, and the solid waste facility. So those are all on the horizon. Here's what we have for the Parsonage House. Basically, it's a renovation of the entire building, making it ADA as well, providing offices. It's a historic building, so we had to be mindful of that. The state had asked. We went back and forth with the state on what they would allow, what they wouldn't allow. So we came to I think a fair agreement with that. DPW building. This is over on the S-curves, and so this is an initial concept plan here. So we're currently developing this, so you'll see some of this stuff shortly. Fire and EMS building. So this is a building proposed right down the street here, with substantial parking, and then it's a building that it's basically a training center. Could be used for a training center for fire and EMS. So large conference type spaces, training spaces. This is right down the street here, right below us. Pardon? I'm sorry, a new building. Correct. Yep. New building, new site, new parking lot. Yep. Yep. Conceptual. Completely conceptual. Nothing has been designed. It's just it's a concept. So there's two I mean, this is like a horseshoe parking lot, okay? But it's basically right below us where the Board of Elections Court Street. Yes. Yep.
Board of Elections building would be at the top left-hand corner of that picture.
Okay. 55 Chamberlain. So this is the building you just recently purchased. All right. So there's a potential of doing some work in that building, or it might be move-in ready. We still have to develop the program and see what is required for the new tenants for that. But I believe this building will allow you to get out of a couple leases. So that's nice. Board of Elections. So again, conceptual. They would like some more space. and, you know, they have that storage building that you referenced. If we do the EMS building, that would go away, and we would do an addition onto the Board of Elections that they could use for their storage, but also they would like to have that used for training as well, like training and conference. So that could work well. Again, still very conceptual. And that's what that would look like, something of that nature, about the size. I mean, they need a lot of space. I was actually surprised just how much space they needed. It's almost the size of their building. But they do have it on their site. They do have the room on their site. County historian, right now she's currently housed in the church. But that's ongoing, trying to figure out what that looks like in the future. What kind of needs there's going to be. And then the highway shops, you know. Less on space, more on condition of the facility. The space is, I think, is pretty adequate, but the condition of the buildings need to be looked at. And then the WAM building, we're looking at, once we get employment and training. Who's in the WAM building? Employment and training out of there, we would use that for record storage. It's got a new roof on it now, so we feel like that'd be a good fit for that. And so we consider the BCS and the space needs and the space study as phase one, or project one. And so at this point, this is the conclusion of phase and project. I'm sorry, I get it mixed up. Project one, and then the roadmap, or basically the reallocation of spaces, we're considering as project two. Okay. And so project two might look like something like this. Now there's a lot of information in here. So it took me a while just to get it straight in my head, and I'm still not sure I'm there. But so what we have here, so we have it broken out by phases, okay? In those phases, you can see on the bottom, that's kind of like a timeline in terms of duration, and we did it by months, okay? But we also tried to explain what happens in every phase up on the slide. So if we looked at 1A, so this is the Crossroads renovation. So this is what we're proposing. If we wanted to start this roadmap, we're saying, okay, let's start. If we started today, this is what it would look like, okay? You could start it 6 months from now. The durations, we feel, is still be the same. You know, we did it in durations and not on dates. So if we started today, moving departments currently to 55 Chamberlain. So 55 Chamberlain, if you were to look back, it's over 8,000 square feet, and we were proposing community services coming into that building, and they cover about 4,000 square feet. They currently have 4,000 square feet. So that leaves about 4,000 square feet at Chamberlain. So there's some space there. So what we're proposing is that we move planning and tourism and EMS and fire to 55 Chamberlain temporarily, okay? That gets them out of Crossroads. Now we renovate Crossroads, okay? And without anybody in it, which is nice. And then once that renovation is done, we're proposing 24 months for a renovation. That's design, renovation. We move health department into Crossroads, okay? So now that takes the health department out of this building. In that same process, during that same time, okay, during this phase one, we're doing the design and the construction of the DPW, all right? And so, again, that's about a 24-month period, and to relocate them is 3 months. So what we're saying is, and we're just throwing times out there, if we're moving someone from point A to point B, we're just saying 3 months. But if there's somebody in there that this person's moving to, we're saying 6 months. We're gonna say it takes 3 months to get them out of there, 3 months to get them in, okay? Just so you'll see 3 months and 6 months, and that's just kind of how we got there. So now we can move, after 24 months, we can get DPW out of this building. They move to their new facility, okay? And then at this same time, thank you. At this same time, we're building EMS and fire down the street on Court Street, okay? That's a small building, small parking lot. We're saying that takes 12 months, okay? 3 months for allocation. So that's phase one. That's the first step. Phase two. So phase two is the renovation of the county clerk and relocate tax map. So this is, now we're moving over into the courthouse, okay? Renovation of the county clerk and relocate tax maps. At the same time, we're doing renovations of the ground floor to relocate the MAG, all right? That's a small renovation. We're saying that takes approximately 18 months. And that renovation starts 6 months after phase one, okay? It'll make sense towards the end of the slide, towards the end of the presentation, because you can see kind of where things line up. It's a lot of information. Relocate MAG and tax map. So now we're making that relocation, that's 3 months. And then we're gonna relocate employment and training and DA, okay? So employment and training will move into previous health department space. So we move the health department out, we're moving employment and training in, okay? On the ground floor. The DA will move into the DPW space, but that's not their final home. That's a temporary spot, okay? So we're not doing any work to that DPW, the old DPW space, right? We're just gonna move the DA in there temporarily. Then we move to phase three. A lot of moving parts. Relocate court, DSS, and public defender. So following the DA's relocation, so on the coattails of the DA, their previous space on the second floor courthouse can be designated as courts. So now that becomes courts, that's their final resting place. You're done. Now the second floor is all courts, okay? Following this, Department of Social Service can be relocated from the second floor of the courthouse to the court's previous space on the first floor. So now they move over to the previous spot of the courts, and that's their final spot. And then the public defender relocates to the WAM building. So they're gonna be out in the WAM building for a little while, okay? Not a permanent spot, not a permanent spot. So no renovations, nothing like that. You know, when I say no renovations, I mean no major renovations. There might be some things where you have to account for, you know, data, power, whatever, you know, certain needs like that that are specific to be able to do your daily functions. And then renovation of future public defender office. So that's the prior DSS space. That's about a 12-month to renovate, 3 months to relocate. So phase three to begin at the start of year 2.5. How many have I lost? Yeah. Phase four. County office building, third floor renovations, build out, and roof projects. So with the relocation of the health department and the public defender, the third floor is completely empty, okay? So now you can renovate the third floor, which they're substantial renovations. So you wouldn't want to do those renovations with a department in there, I don't think, you know, it would be tough. I think you would get a lot of complaints for a year. So it's completely empty. You have that whole space to be able to renovate that. And that's a good thing, because that kind of starts the dominoes. So takes 12 months to renovate, 6 months to relocate. Phase five, now you're on, once the third floor is complete, the department's on the second floor, because there's a lot of departments on the second floor, they can relocate to the third floor in a newly renovated space. So that's, if you remember, that's like the legislature, that's the admin, I think planning and tourism is on the 3rd floor, so they can come over. So now you're starting to fill that. You can fill that third floor, while at the same time emptying the 2nd floor. So this allows for the space on the 2nd floor to be renovated to the treasurer, for the treasurer. Okay, so on the 2nd floor, we don't have the luxury of being able to have the 2nd floor, but the renovations aren't they're not as bad. So we feel like we can have the DA, because the DA he's in that temporary DPW office, right? So he's gonna be there all alone, and there's gonna be renovations done to this area for the treasurer. Okay, on this floor. And that's a lot less. That we're saying that's only 8 months. Once that, so now we're on 6. Phase 6, courthouse ground floor renovations. Now we can renovate. And so now the treasurer has moved up to the 2nd floor. The DA is still there. We can renovate prior treasurer space for the DA. Okay, so now the DA sees the end in sight. Renovate previous DSS space for the public defender. And this takes about 12 months. And when that is all done, now the DA can move into their final space. And so can DSS. All right, so let's look at this. This might make a little bit more sense to you. And I believe this is on. So the roadmap condensed, okay? So if you go down it, everything's broken out into phases, and you can see as you go across those timelines and how they align. There's some overlap, which is nice. There's times when we're able to do things simultaneously. But basically you can see that the whole process we're proposing is a 78-month process. Okay, that's the duration. And so you can kind of see just how long things would take. So if the DA had a concern, hey, how long am I going to be in the old DPW site? So if we go down to, sorry. Oh, I just had it. Sorry, it's probably better on this one. Right here. Relocate. It's actually better seen on the next slide, which might be an easier slide to see. So this nice thing about this slide is this is departments, okay, specifically. So this will tell if a department asks, how does this affect me? When am I going to be affected? This slide, this roadmap, if you will tells the story. The planning, if you look at the very last line item, planning and tourism, they're the last department to move. But, so previously I said, okay, the DA. So the DA moves in month 30 into the DPW, and their final move is in month 75. So they're in the DPW office for 45 months. Okay, so you can kind of get a gauge on what kind of impact these moves will have on certain departments. There's not a lot that have temporary locations, but planning and tourism, they're probably the longest, right? Because they move out of the crossroads, right out of the gate at month 1. And they don't move into their final home until month 78. So they're the most impacted in terms of duration in a temporary quarters. So this is a nice slide for that, to really tell the tale on the effect on these departments. I believe that is it. That is it. It's a lot of information, and I'm happy to answer Any questions on any part of it?
Question. You show offices being moved over to Chamberlain Street, but you don't show when a timeline is for community services, who that building was actually bought for, when they're going to move into that building.
I currently do not have that information. That is being worked through by the administration. So I do not currently have that.
So we have no time frame whatsoever at this point for that?
I personally do not.
Okay.
No, that has not been relayed to us yet.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question, but I also want to say, very nicely done.
Thank you.
We've been waiting for this for a long time, and it was very well worth the wait. I think you've laid it out very nice, very clear, the project and all the thought that went into it, so nicely done, thank you.
Thank you for saying that.
I have a question. Will the main elevator here go to the third floor to get everyone up there?
So I think the administration was thinking they'd like to have the other elevator feed the third floor, the one that's near the sheriff's department. And I might ask Tom to clarify this, sorry. Carissa.
So the thought, we have not run anything by anyone other than Hunt at this point in time. This is just the concept. There'd have to be a lot of work, especially with the sheriff on the security. But my thought was this internal elevator, because it's in the middle of everyone's workspace, that we could shut that off to public access. We could key card it so only employees can use this middle one. And then the one out by the MAG, where everybody should be screened that are public, reaches all 3 floors, and that would be the public access elevator.
That makes sense. The third floor, this is tongue-in-cheek, the outside area that's empty up there, are you going to utilize that?
Yes, ma'am. We did an analysis on that a few weeks back. We had our structural engineer look at that to see if it could handle a roof over that courthouse or that courtyard. And yeah, we feel confident we can do that.
Well, that's news.
Yeah.
Okay. I was hoping for a pickleball court, but that works. I'll ask another question if no one else has a question.
Absolutely.
The old church I see is in here, and you targeted for the historian. And I suppose I could go on the software and look at the assessment of the building. I've heard various things. Is that building worth putting the money into to keep it?
I think you'll find that it's not. Yeah, we had our structural engineer look at that, and it's in rough shape. It is in rough shape. So I don't, and especially with the some of the pricings that we've seen recently, I don't think you would entertain that. Especially for a storage. If your intent is for a storage building, I don't think I think your money's probably spent somewhere else.
Is that considered a historic building?
I mean, it very well could.
I mean, if the other building was, I didn't know if that
Yeah,
the church was.
It's not necessary. I mean, I don't know. We didn't submit it to the state because we weren't doing any work on it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a good chance that it could be, but it's not a guarantee.
Yeah.
Yep, not a guarantee.
Well, it would cost more if it was to fix it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
This is not directed to you, sir, but maybe it's more directed towards the board. Maybe we should stop talking about how to spend $100 million of taxpayer money and talk about how to lower property tax and sales tax. Thank you.
I have a question too, and I see that the timeline, very well done. It's very helpful.
Thank you.
Now, this probably isn't for you, it's more for administration back there.
Okay.
I know that through the Planning and Economic Development Committee, we were going to start next year with tourism going in economic development. According to this, it looks like it's going to stay in planning for quite a few years.
No, tourism is going to economic development by the beginning of the year. This concept is based on just square footage, and I think our economic development is going to land near planning, so it just mattered who goes where. I don't
Oh,
believe
that
that
would
would
be good.
disrupt that plan at all, and actually should enhance those ability of those departments to work together, because they won't be so disjointed.
I agree. I like that idea of them all going into one area, so thank you, Carissa.
No, I have
Anybody else?
another question.
Go ahead.
What's our next step here? We've been waiting for this with anticipation. We have a really good plan. What is our next step here as legislators and administration to take that first step? What do we need to do? What needs to
I
be
think our
done?
next step's going to be to have another work session and work on phase one and the feasibility of it, seeing our budget years coming up. Carissa might be able to add to this. I know that we've discussed this some.
I think, number one, the building condition survey is so helpful. So if you haven't noticed, we tend to put off repairs on buildings, which we all know, if the longer you put off things, the more it costs. And you look at the 50 years for a roof. This is the original roof on this building. Tom has done an excellent job with his department, looking at all the capital costs of everything. He's looked at his bridges, he's looked at his equipment, he's inventoried them all and figured out when the replacement schedule should be. This is the way we're going to do it with the building, and that should help you to budget things timely and over a longer course of time. So that's good. There might be some things in here that you might want to build into next year's budget or beyond. So that's probably the first step, is to look at this and have Tom go through it and see, is there anything in the building condition survey that needs to be addressed right away? And then after that, you're probably looking at two things. What are you doing with the newly acquired 55 Chamberlain? And are you moving forward on that DPW building? We are very, very close. We've done a lot of work on it. We've spent a lot of money on it. I think it makes sense to move that forward. And I think we'll be coming to you with more plans on that this fall. Is that correct, Tom? So those are the first two things I think you need to decide.
I have a quick question, too. With the DPW building, that would involve bonding and looking into that, since we've done some preliminary work with that?
I believe, I'm just going to stick with the treasurer's standard answer until we get more info. The plan would be to use a combination of fund balance, grants, and bonding when we get to that point.
Okay,
And we've
thank
set
you.
ourselves up with the proper resolutions and talking to bond counsel that if and when you want a bond, you could.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman Harris.
Thank you. A couple thoughts. I don't know how we get there from A to Z, but it's going to have to be, as Carissa mentioned, with good understanding from the board, because she said we're operating on such razor-thin margins as it is, as a county. There's really only a couple ways to fund this, and that's borrowing or eating up fund balance. So we need to find out as a board, really, what is our appetite for, or raising taxes. What is our appetite for raising taxes? I think I know the answer to that one. What's our appetite for decimating our fund balance? That needs to be a conversation. And how do we want to time this borrowing? Because even if we borrow, the cost of borrowing and its hit on our annual budget is going to be significant, to the point where I'm not sure at this point, this is not the conversation for today. I'm not sure at this point if we could borrow now and not raise taxes. I mean, that's a treasurer question, but that's the way I see it. So if that's the case, really we need to talk about, all right, this is the Cadillac. Where's the board going to land with what's actually feasible and palatable for the board? And I don't know how we get there, but
There's also probably a fourth source of funding I didn't mention. Some of our departments, like Conflict Defender, have funding streams available to them where they can claim the cost of either renovations or new buildings. And trying to look, we have not examined any of that, because this was the most effective and efficient use of our current space and lease space based on what department's needs are. But you could also look at the ones that can claim some of this and see, maybe you put them first in the process, if possible.
and while I've got the floor, and then I'll yield, my only other thought is that I think, since emails are already flying around from various departments, probably a good opportunity to get feedback from the departments based on the presentation. Just to circle back, I think you guys did a great job with the survey and addressed a lot of the needs, but there's already thoughts bubbling up to the surface that probably should be fairly addressed.
And again, this is just a concept. It's it's still, you would have to approve any steps in the process. You'd want input from the departments heads all again. You'd want input from the sheriff on security, on IT, on some of the placement of things as well. So just a concept. We did have a department head meeting last week, and the department heads that were there knew this was coming, and we told them, you know, you probably will be surprised, and just, this is not anything in stone. So they hopefully are all relaxed about it.
Thanks.
Mr. Healy, you have something?
I'll let Jen go first.
I thought it was very nicely done, especially since I have no background in this and I understood basically. But my question is about parking, which I know it looked to me like you were taking one of the parking areas away. So there's no extra parking, like this is not part of space needs, is not parking, right?
So, no, we looked at parking.
Okay.
A big thing that we thought was, you know, we're adding the parking lot below, so we think that's going to help, but we're taking the health department away, right? We're taking the health department, putting them on Crossroads, so all their employees, all their people that come to the health department, they're going out there. They're not coming
The
out
same
here.
with DPW too.
And the DPW as well. Yep, so we feel like that's going to free some parking up.
And I'm just probably going to circle back to the chairman's original question about how do we get started. Probably that parking lot on Court Street would be my ideal phase 1, 2, because we need to address more parking here. And we know every time we do construction on anything, we eat up parking, just as we have with trying to do the fence and guardrail replacements and the roof too this summer. It's really impacted our parking, so very important.
Thank you. Well, I've been a proponent of us taking a look at Health and Human Services, a new building, only because I've been told that there's possible funding from the state for such a building, which would take care of most all of the costs of anything like that. And we had some property offered to us that not only would take care of, would give us about 4 acres of parking space if we needed it, but also would give us a water and sewer ready site within close proximity of the courthouse. And Hunt also thought, like in brief discussion we had with Hunt, they had some ideas about where we might actually be able to capitalize on some other funding for that site too. The Crossroads, I don't know what's going to happen to that. We don't own that. And if we get much development out in that area, I think that's going to have a commercial value and we might not want to use that for county offices if it could generate more sales tax or provide private sector jobs. So those are my thoughts.
Anyone else?
I just, if you look at this phase 1, would we try to bond that whole project, project 2, phase 1? Would you try to bond that whole thing as one thing? In other words, if you're gonna borrow money or use fund balance, the phase 1 looks pretty practical to me, where you could actually do the parking lot and building at the same time you're doing the DPW building. I mean, that's, so, that'd be my suggestion, is to take a look at that and say, how much is that gonna cost, and bond that whole thing, or use the fund balance just for that project and move that along quickly, I guess is what I want to say.
I think, you know, those are discussions you should probably have when you have work groups on this, but going back to Chairman Harris's statement and Mr. Sears' statement, I think we can only afford to put so much bond payment into our budget. We already have 2 bonds. Off the top of my head, I think the first one drops off in '29. And so ideally, you wouldn't be having another bond payment until then. Will we get to one before then, I don't know. That's up to you guys.
Anyone else?
Sure, I'll say something. These are my thoughts about this. I think this is really good, and I thank you again for this, looking out at least 5 years. I mean, this is something I think as legislators we need to be doing, is looking forward out there and putting together plans. We have to look at today's budget also and this year's budget, but I think one of our roles as legislators here in the county is to look forward and how can we put together in place plans that will impact the next, I'm going to say 7 generations is what the Native Americans used to say, but how can we affect the next generation or 2 generations? And that's what part of our role is here today, is to look forward and to do that. And I think you've given us a plan. We just got to figure out how to do it economically and still stay within our budgets.
And I think part of this goal and this exercise is to develop that plan. And I think all of us would take back decisions that were made in years past because they were made in an isolated silo. Just how do we help this one department or this one project with space at least? And we've put things in places that don't make sense and have caused more problems than they've solved. So I think just developing the plan itself is a good exercise that will help guide the next board and the board after that as well.
Actually, you can't really go after funding until you got a plan. So we've made that step. So that's important. Doesn't matter if we follow it directly, but we have some sort of a plan. I think that's very important. Does anyone else have anything? Okay. Anything else you want to offer, Mike? Tom?
No, just thank you for
Dean?
the opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Did a great job.
Thank you.
So is there any other unfinished business? New business? Good of the order? Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Root will second.
All in favor? Aye. We're adjourned.